Did you ever hear from the midwives after any of this?
So while I was in the hospital, they left some napkins, some paper plates, some forks, some cups, some like paper goods, and a gift card to Publix on my doorstep, and a card.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So sorry for your loss. Blah 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 blah. Right. Couple times while I was in the hospital, one of the midwives tried to reach out, and I ignored them, and I had nothing to say, and I had no reason to be like, like I didn't want to hear their apologies and hear their bullshit, or I didn't want to hear what they had to say, so I ignored that. And then of course, after we tried to seek legal counseling and stuff, I wasn't trying to be in contact with them, but
Yeah.
yeah, so no, I had no, like, some people right away, they want to talk to their midwives or whatever, and I just like, oh, it's not the midwife, midwives did nothing wrong. And I'm thinking, well, I think about all the red flags, they did quite a bit wrong, and so the last thing I want to do is have anything to do with these people, to be honest. So that was not.
Did now you said you went through a birth center?
Yeah.
Did the owner of the birth center try to reach out to you at all?
She emailed me.
What'd she say?
Oh, so sorry for your loss. We can't imagine what you're going through and whatever. If you need anything, we're here for you. Some type of that's it. Yeah. It was pretty generic.
Why do you think they would send you paper plates and napkins and
so I wouldn't have to do dishes, so that I could, you're grieving, don't do dishes. Here's some paper plates and napkins so you can, I don't know. It was so weird to come home from the hospital to have that at my doorstep. Like,
that's
no,
weird.
Yeah. So, but I think they were freaking out too, because obviously they lost a baby. And so, what was going to happen. And little did they know that one of my best friend's husband, was an investigative reporter, and he really, I'm so thankful for that, for the story, and for him kind of like, okay, I heard somebody else had a baby that died, and my friend Riva can't be the only one that this has happened to. And so he started, after just a little bit of digging, he's like, I think we really have a story that we could, come up with. And then that's where they found you, and they found everybody else that really, like, this is not just it doesn't just, a local problem, or it's not just something that doesn't happen. This actually is a widespread problem, and people need to know about it. And had an article like failure to deliver been out when I, had my baby, I would have, really changed my mind, or I would have been like, this, why would I ever consider home birth? Like, that's just crazy, it's absolutely crazy. And then of course I thought a lot of it was like, I did so many things wrong, and I felt like all of it was my fault. But then I see other moms who, they had different, maybe not my situation, but I'm not the only one. This isn't the only one that this has happened to. And I guess it sucks that we're a part of this club of, baby loss club through home birth. But I felt comfort in knowing that I wasn't the only one, because I literally for a long time felt very like shamed, and I felt very like alone, that I was the only one, and that I did all these things wrong. But
I have read so many stories about losses and what led up to them, and The only people I've ever seen who quote unquote did anything wrong were people who were trying for unassisted births. Almost all of the home birth losses involve midwives either straight up lying to the family when they're asked if there's anything wrong and if they should transfer. They dismiss questions during pregnancy. They ignore red flags left and right. It's kind of like people are like, well, no, midwives are so great. It's like, no, because things worked for you. You think your midwife is great, but I've watched midwives ignore so many things, do so little, lie straight to the people's faces while things are going wrong. It's really hard to see how the families could have made a different decision because they were never being given the information they needed to make those decisions. I mean, your fundal height was going back and forth and no one had a reason why. That's not right. Nobody showed up when you were first in labor to check on you. That's not right. And it's kind of like you say you did things right. And I'm like, well, given the information you had at the time and you were the first time mom, you had no reason to ask other questions to say, why is this happening? There really is nothing you could have done yourself under those circumstances to change the outcome. I mean, other than basically disregarding everything your midwife was telling you and saying, I don't trust you anymore, I'm out of here. That's about the only way it would have worked.
Yeah.
So you really, no, I mean, yes, you made the decision, but your mother had 2 home births. My mom had 9 births, none of them at home, but I thought, wow, my mom had 9 births, no complications. I'm going to rock this. And it was like, yep, okay, no. It other people's births do not affect yours. It's just, It doesn't work that way.
That's why I feel like on this channel too, we really make a point to try to emphasize that, you know, if ever people are commenting on videos or even on some of the groups that we work within, that we are a part of, if people steer towards blaming lost parents or blaming home birth parents, we come in real quick with that, because it's exactly that, is that we try to point out how victimized these families are, and both during pregnancy and the birth and after, because so often then, you know, you're censored, your narrative, you're gaslit. There's all of these different things that happen to lost parents too right after, as you've probably experienced many times over in sharing your story. And it's just so important that, exactly what Andrew was saying, highlighting that, you know, these, unfortunately at this point, we always talk about how you could really make a bingo board out of a lot of what these midwives and, you know, out of hospital providers say, but they count on silencing stories and cultivating groups that silence and
Which is
otherwise don't make that obvious to people.
It absolutely amazes me that people like live to do that, to silence these people. Like, I mean, never in a world would I imagine that I would get so much hate and so much shame for like saying, hey, my baby died during a home birth, and you know, home birth isn't actually all that safe, and you know, you really need to be very aware. And oh, you're just fear mongering, and you know, I'm like, this is how am I fear mongering by telling the truth that my, you know, child, we did not have good care. We should have had better care. We should have had a better outcome. My child should not have died. You know, and it just there's so many like crazy people out there that just I never knew it existed until I became a part of that you had people so you know, and you think, oh, you know, have babies at home, they're supposed to be like these free loving type of like, you know, type people or whatever, and they're really, it's not. It's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all about our choice and our rights and our bodies and our babies and all these things that we heard before. But if you end up on the other side of things where things go wrong, you are banned, you are bad, you're labeled, they shame us, they bash us, they'll delete us. Like I've heard it all, seen it all, and it shouldn't be like that, because you're taking away the reality of what's really going on. But it's sadly, it's like we're attacking home birth, and we're attacking midwives, and we're attacking women's bodies, or like we're doing all these things just by being honest of what happened to us. And that's not how it is. That's not what it was. Like, we didn't know, and other people deserve to know the truth, because just like you said with the article, if I would have read that, like if this had happened years before my son, and I was looking at home birth, and I had seen that of all these families of all these different situations all over the US, I would have thought differently, because like you, I didn't want a home birth either. I wasn't like dead set on, I must have a home birth at all costs. This is it. And seeing the stuff of like, we were part of it, but even reading each other's stories and watching the videos and all that stuff that was online, I was like, holy crap, this is so much bigger than you could imagine it is. Like that's the worst thing about it. And you do afterwards, you're so isolated and you're so alone, because the only people you had was the community you were in, and they're like, we're here for you. But the reality is they don't want us sharing like what happened. They really do not want us to share anything, you know. And I don't, and it drives me nuts, because later, even my friend who was going side by side with me, she had a tear. For her first baby, she had a really bad tear, and they blamed her for it, and she wasn't allowed to talk about it. So when they would meet in their circles with all the home birther friends and with the midwives, and she was not allowed to say that she had a tear. And she told me that after my son died, and I was like, why didn't you tell me this before? Like, you know, she's like, well, I don't want them to kick me out. And I was like, but my son's gone. Like, why didn't you just say something? And so it's kind of one of those, they really do gaslight us. They really do manipulate us into the point of like, we're not sharing what's really happening, and it's happening all the time everywhere. So which makes it worse, makes it a whole lot worse. And I'm glad that we found each other. I will say that I'm really glad that we found each other, because we're not alone. But at the same time, all of us are preventable. Like every single one of us, if we were in the hospital, it would have never happened. Every single one of us would have never met. All of our children would be alive today. And that's probably the hardest thing about meeting each other, is the fact that we know we share such a similar bond. Our midwives may be different. We may be in a different area, but it's the same story over and over and over again, unfortunately.
I'd like to just say that any midwife who thinks she's a good provider and doesn't respond when someone says, hey, I think I'm in labor, with cool, let me get myself together and I'll come and check you out, is really, this is what the whole pregnancy has been working towards. Labor, delivery, baby. If you are not sitting there being just as excited as the person you're caring for and hustling your buns on over there to see what's happening, just drop out of midwifery already. You're just lazy.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is the two midwives that were either one was going to be on call for my delivery. They weren't there. They were busy starting to open their own birth center in a different area. So they were taking care of me for, you know, the whole 9 months. And then at the end, they sent somebody else in because they were busy opening their own in St. Pete. And I just find that when I found that out, I was extremely upset that, you know, because also part of the process is getting to know your provider and having them get to know you. And that's the whole, you know, oh, well, it's better than having, you know, going to an OB where you may or may not have them at delivery. And, you know, they instill all these things of why going through a birth center and having a midwife is so personal and so much better, when in fact, well, you know what, y'all screwed me over too, because you ended up not being who I thought was going to be at the birth, which may or may not have changed the outcome. One of them might have been like, okay, you've been in labor for so long, let's go to the hospital. Not this person that I ended up with, you know, it could have turned out to be different. It was extremely poor practice. And, you know, it's like, they have no, oh, I'm opening up a different first 10 or so, I can't show up to your birth. Like, just amazes me.
How long do you think you were pushing?
A long time.
I mean,
Like, probably 3 hours, 4 hours. And I started but I started pushing before that randomly, even when I wasn't in contractions, because I felt like she was stuck for a long time before I actually was really, really pushing. So, but I think from the time that she was delivered at 12:30, and they finally did the check at 10. I know from that time I was really, really pushing from 10 to 12:30 to get her out.
When was that Doppler check where you said the student midwife gave your husband a look?
Probably around the 11:30 mark sometime.
I don't think they had a clue what was going on. I really don't.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, no.
I mean, at the point where she was doing turtle sign and was blue, I think they figured out something was wrong. But here's the thing. If you think you've got trouble coming down the pike, if you've got someone who's been pushing for possibly more than 4 hours, you should have all the resuscitation equipment right there at hand and ready to go.
Oh yeah, their oxygen tank was there. It was ready, but they didn't have it turned on when the baby came out. They didn't know what they were doing.
Turned on. They were not. I mean, I assume by the time they finally got the baby out, they were like, oh yeah, we're going to have to do a resus on this one.
And then they were like, oh, my friend was like, oh, who do you want the mask for, the baby or and they're like, oh, give it to the mom. No, give it to the baby. Like they didn't know who to give it to at first also. And I'm like, oh my, like, and then this is just like, and I'm laying there and then all of a sudden they're trying to resus my baby. And then my placenta is birthed and I'm just laying there like completely helpless. And then a few moments later is when I was surrounded by all these people and I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I was aware, but I was in shock. I was in total and complete shock that this was happening. And it was unbelievable, really.
Yeah.
Unbelievable that you could have people who are in the business of life and death, caring for a live being, two live beings, a mother and a baby, caring for lives, and be so uneducated and not ready for emergencies. And so like, you know, EMT people have probably less training and more you know, hands-on training than a midwife who's delivering babies.
I always love people who's like, well, you know, you chose the wrong midwife. It's like the number of good midwives out there is so tiny that it would be sheer damn luck if you managed to run across a good one instead of one who's basically a danger to yourself and your baby. It's just, but that's part of the gaslighting phenomenon.
Those people, oh, well, I had a beautiful home birth, and so, oh, I'm sorry you didn't. I'm sorry your baby died, but I had a beautiful home birth, and I'm like, you got lucky. You got lucky. You know, you got lucky, and I'm happy for you. You got lucky, but you know what?
The thing is, I don't even think they understand how they sound. I had a friend, and she had her son. Her pregnancy was just very bad. She had severe intrauterine growth restriction, and her son was born very tiny and very premature, and he didn't make it. And I went to his funeral at the gravesite with my son, who was 6 months old, and I felt absolutely horrible sitting there with my live, healthy baby at somebody's baby's funeral. And at least I had the self-awareness. She said she did not mind, and she loved seeing him. At least I had the self-awareness to know that it's not necessarily the best thing to put in someone's face when they're grieving, is that you have a live, healthy baby and had a beautiful home. Yes, thank you so much. That's all I really wanted to hear at this moment. Yeah. No, what they're saying is, I loved my home birth and I'm not going to make you feel bad. Make me feel bad about it. It's like, no, I don't want you to make you feel bad about it. I want you to realize there are real risks, and simply because you didn't encounter them doesn't mean that home birth is safe.
Yeah.
Well, look at, we have Liz coming on, Bambi's coming on. They've had babies at home, fine. And then when they went to have their next one, they had a baby that died. So it's a chance, it's luck, it's a, flip of a coin. You really just don't know. Do you know what I mean? Somebody could have a great experience, and then the next time or the next time they lose a baby at home. We just don't know. So it's like, I think the odds, the chances are just not worth it, in my opinion. It's just not worth it. The experience for what we want, you can have that in a medical environment. You can have it in a hospital. Like I didn't want pain relief, and I really thought like, oh, they're going to force pain relief. And then I've talked to doctors later and they were like, no, we're not going to force pain relief on you. And I was like, well, I didn't know. I was a first time mom I don't know anything about any of this, so.
But
yeah.
I guess I wasn't really in for it. I mean, the experience, yes, I wasn't trying to do like I didn't have a photographer, and I didn't have like the whole Instagram, like home birth. So that wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted to have a baby in the setting of my own home, because I thought I could, and I thought I could do it safely, just, and for lack of, if I didn't need to have the intervention, I thought, okay, why not? But you have some people who are doing it for like, the photos and all this and everything. But what's crazy is that when I think about it, because I go back to that, yes, I chose to have a home birth, and I chose to have the experience of a home birth. And to take that experience of however long it takes to birth a baby, this experience, I took away a lifetime of experiences with my child, because I'm missing all the birthdays, all the firsts. I'm missing every piece of their life because of a very small piece of their life as the birth. It's like, when you think about it, nobody cares how you came into this world. Nobody cares. Oh, your mom had a picture perfect Instagram home birth. Is that going to change anything down? Are you going to get into Harvard because your mom like had you, at home in a perfect birthing tub? And, it's like, when you think about that small experience, it's so stupid. And then when you think about being in a hospital, it's such a short amount of time that you're actually giving birth in a hospital. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. Have a hospital birth, have a team there ready for you at the drop of a hat if you need it. And, have your baby, bring it home, and spend the rest of your life with your baby, instead of risking your baby's life and your life on having an experience that lasts, a few hours or a day or two. It's like, it's just such a messed up mentality, that thinking, oh, well, I need to have this perfect home birth, when in reality it's a very short, small piece of the rest of your life, and it's like, why even risk it? Why even do that? And I just, I look at that and I just, in hindsight, it's like, but that's again why this channel is here, to bring awareness and to help people realize that it's not worth it. Sure, you can have a beautiful home birth, but what if you don't? What if you don't? What if your baby dies? And there's that chance. You know how long I sat in the ambulance before they actually took me to the hospital? Like, it felt like it was forever, but it was probably 25 minutes that I just sat in the ambulance. You don't just get whisked away and go to the hospital right away. It's just, that's not how it works. And then once you're in the hospital, you need to get admitted and this and that. It's not like, there's so much time that can pass that it's not like, okay, oh, I'm 5 minutes from the hospital. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that you're going to be there in 5 minutes. It's such a misconception of, oh, I'm only a few miles. It doesn't matter. And those miles and seconds and minutes matter. Like, really.
They do. And I was on the same thing. There was a hospital right down the road from me. I was like, I'm like 5 minutes or less away. I don't even hardly have any stoplights to get to the hospital. It's like, it's just a straight shot right there. And the reality is it's never 5 minutes. It's never that amount of time. It's not how it works. They have to admit you. They have to examine you. They have to examine your baby. They have to check you out. They can't just do stuff and they can't take the word of whatever the midwife says either, because they're not even, you know what I mean? They don't work for the hospital. So even if a hospital's or a midwife comes in, like, she needs a C-section right now, like, they can't do that. They have to assess you to do the next steps, you know?
Yeah. And those minutes that are going by are very precious. They are very precious. So it's, you know, for the midwives and the birthing centers and the home birth people to tell you, oh, well, if you're only a few minutes from the hospital, nothing to worry about. It's a complete lie. It's a complete misconception. It really is.
Yeah. It is. Now, did you end up reporting like to the medical board, the midwives or the birth center?
It took me like 2 years to even go to the hospital, get my records, to get baby V's records. I kind of like stuffed it all in and didn't do a whole lot of action after I realized that I couldn't take any legal, you know, I was basically cut off there at that point. I wasn't able to do anything further legally. So that basically like killed me inside, and I didn't know what to do. And I ended up being pregnant shortly after. So I didn't do anything. I focused on surviving, and I had a really hard time talking about it and doing anything with it. So it wasn't until Josh Salmon started, you know, coming to me about wanting to do the report and wanting to get my information and wanting to do that I felt like that was giving me a voice. And I felt like, and then I got in contact with some other lost moms, and I felt like I wasn't so alone anymore. And so then I was able to kind of dig a little bit into, you know, looking at the medical thing, looking at the records and looking at what they were saying and stuff. But I wasn't, after it happened, I wasn't in the state of mind to really dive into any of that.